Shut up. Ugh. I don't know if you use this MFL game day app at all,
No, I don't.
but it always defaults to turn on the announcements. But I have my laptop muted usually when I'm watching football, so I
Yeah.
just started using robot voice. Touchdown, AJ Green, whatever yards, Andy Dalton.
Oh my God.
Shut up.
I think that's Dwayne
Stop
Allen
talking.
making the catch.
Okay, I got Audacity open, ready to go.
We can record in 3, 2, 1, record. Okay.
Recording.
I am starting. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. After a couple-week hiatus, I'm back, and I'm excited to be here. I'm your host, Dan Myler, and I am with my co-host, Matt Price. Matt, how's it going on this Week 11 Sunday night?
Well, the best thing about today, Dan, is that you're back from your hunting trips. From an NFL standpoint, our Packers kind of embarrassed us today, buddy.
Man, it was ugly. It was horrible from the get off. We're not going to spend this time we have with our listeners bitching and moaning about our Packers, though. Although we will probably touch on at least one of them during the downs in the ups and downs, which we'll do once again here in Week 11. But instead of being down in the doldrums to start things off, let's start with those dynasty ups, those guys that carried dynasty owners or came out of nowhere and that dynasty owners should be thinking about this week as Week 11 wraps up and Week 12 is upon us. Let's start under center first with these dynasty ups, Matt. We'll talk about Kirk Cousins. I've never really been a big Kirk Cousins guy, going all the way back to his time at Michigan State. I saw him as a field general and a heck of a competitive guy, a good thrower of the football, but never the guy that I would think I was putting my dynasty team's fate in. He appears to be a guy that could be that. A lot of dynasty owners have already flipped that page and turned to Cousins as their guy. He had another big game in Week 11, 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards passing. He's been a quarterback 1 in 6 of his last 8 games. Once again, the second half of the season comes and Kirk Cousins is putting up big numbers. Is Kirk Cousins one of the guys that you're comfortable with as your quarterback 1 in a single quarterback league? And with his contract looming and nobody knowing where he's going to play next year, a big question mark there. How do you feel about him long term?
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with almost any quarterback as my quarterback 1 in a 1 quarterback league, So I've never really been a Cousins guy either. He has been up and down this season. Last week he had 1 touchdown and interception. 2 weeks ago he had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions against Seattle. The week before that against Dallas, 1 touchdown. So, I mean, he's a guy that you could just put in and you're going to get an okay floor. Like, he's not going to kill you with a lot of turnovers. But and then he has these blow up weeks, So, I mean, he's just kind of like that. I think that low level quarterback 1, high level quarterback 2 that you feel okay with having in your lineup if you're not going to spend up one of those studs. Long term, I mean, yeah, his future's in question. He might not be back in Washington next year. What does it mean if he's not with Jay Gruden? It seems like San Francisco, which is where he was always rumored to go, has kind of moved on when they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. So. I guess he could end up in Cleveland. I guess he could end up in Jacksonville. So I guess there are some okay landing spots in terms of what the teams look like this season, but there is that uncertainty there.
Do you think Cousins belongs in Washington? Is that where dynasty owners should be hoping he stays so he's still attached with Gruden? Or do you see one of those other spots as the place for Kirk Cousins?
He's producing here. So why what is the saying? Why fix something that isn't broke? So,
right.
So, I mean, hopefully they can agree to it. I don't think they're going to franchise him again for a third time. I think that would make him like a $34 million quarterback for 2018. So I hope they can work out something long term, especially now that San Francisco landing spot is gone. But, your guess is as good as mine there.
Couldn't agree more. I don't know if he'll ever have the elite upside. I don't think we're ever going to talk about Kirk Cousins as a top 5 option at the position, but he is comfortably in my top 10 as well now. And certainly a guy that dynasty owners can depend on for the long haul. Of course, that can change if he lands somewhere that doesn't offer him very good weapons or with a coaching staff that isn't doing much. But
they do have a fairly tough playoff schedule too for the fantasy playoffs. They have the Chargers, the Cardinals, and then they have the Broncos in week 16. So a little bit difficult there too if you're planning on relying on them for the rest of this year.
Good point for sure. Let's move to some ball carriers, and what other place to start than in New Orleans, right? New Orleans is the best running game in the NFL. Some people are scratching their head to that with Sean Payton calling the plays, but it is indeed true. Mark Ingram, another big day on Sunday, 11 carries, 134 yards and a touchdown, also caught 3 passes. We'll get to Alvin Kamara in a minute. Ingram is a running back 1, Matt. He is a top-end running back 1, really. The big week in week 10 follows that up with a nice week, even with the team playing from behind in week 11. He is the ideal trade target for those of you that have not reached your trade deadline just yet. I had a chance to acquire him in a league where I'm a contender this past week, and I passed on a deal that would have sent Mike Williams and a first-round pick. It's a contract league. It's a rental player. His contract would be up. I thought the price was too high, and since then he scored 4 touchdowns, and I'm a big Ingram guy. Maybe I should have done that deal, Matt, because that might have put me over the top. I'm slightly regretting it now. Talk to me about Ingram and his short-term and long-term upside in New Orleans.
Yeah, both Chad and I threw a lot of love to both of these New Orleans running back last week on the show, and nothing's really changed. We were talking about, I believe, how we've always been saying that let's buy Mark Ingram for a mid-first, right? Like that sounds like a great price for us. I don't think when we were talking about we don't think you can really get him for that anymore. So, maybe he does cost that high price tag that you rejected there, Dan. But I don't think there's any question that he's going to help you if you're a contender and you're trying to win the fantasy title this year. So if you can afford it, then he's certainly a good option if you're a little weak at running back.
And looking at it,
and then I was just saying, in the future, he's still signed with New Orleans through next season. I don't know why they would change up the usage right now. I know you probably want to get Kamara a little bit more involved, but what they're doing right now is incredible, and both of them are producing. So hopefully they wouldn't change up that formula too much next season.
Right, and Ingram is a Kamara injury away from taking over all the pass catching duties as well and being that dump off option for Breeze. Let's look at it from the other side of the coin. You're not a contender. You're lower on the totem pole, looking towards 2018 and beyond. We've talked about it a couple times over the last month, maybe 6 weeks. Ingram is an interesting trade away guy as well. A lot of people question his long-term upside. I'm not one of those guys. I know you're not either, at least over the next couple of years while he's still in New Orleans. It would take a lot for me to sell Mark Ingram at this point. I would need a package like that, a first-round pick plus a young player that I really covet.
Yeah, I think I would need, more than a mid-first. I'll just say that. You're never going to get like the 101 or 102, 103, but maybe like the 104 might do it. Like that's probably the range I would be looking at if I thought I was going to reasonably have a chance at selling him.
And then Alvin Kamara, he was awesome once again. 8 carries for 42 yards, caught a touchdown. One of his 6 catches for 75 yards. He's also a running back 1. He's still only a part-time player, Matt, and he might be the rookie of the year in Dynasty through 11 weeks. He's certainly in the conversation and belongs there. And the best part is he was picked in the 2nd round in some rookie drafts, which is crazy. Usually a late first, but there was some value to be had with Kamara. How many rookies, if we were drafting today, would you draft over him in as we stand right now in mid-November?
I think he's probably like the 105 right now for me. I think I would still take Corey Davis and those other 3 running backs, not counting Mixon, ahead of him. Does that make sense?
Okay, so the 3 running backs you're taking are Fournette, Cook, and Hunt?
Yeah, I think so. I guess Cook. I mean, I want McCaffrey in there, so maybe 106. But that might be just me. Yeah, I think that's probably about right. I still think he's in that 106 range for me.
Yeah, I think he's probably in the same range for me. That'd be a tough decision. If somebody sent you the Corey Davis for Alvin Kamara trade offer, that'd be a difficult decision in a full PPR.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would. I wouldn't really want to make the decision either way. You know, if I had Kamara, I'd be not so willing to if I'm, especially if I'm relying on the production. You know, and if I had Davis, like I feel like I paid the 101, so I'm probably going to hold. So that's a tough coin flip right there.
If you're a contender though, right now, and you have Corey Davis who's sitting on your bench, especially in a start two running back leagues, a full PPR league, and somebody sends you that offer, I would have a hard time turning it down. And I would want Kamara in my lineup for this stretch run. I know their schedule has some question marks later in the season as well, but he seems matchup proof because if they're behind, he's catching the ball. If they're ahead, he's still getting double-digit carries. I really feel like Kamara is going to be on a lot of championship rosters this year.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I was looking up. The Titans do have a pretty fun schedule coming up too, though. They have the Colts, the Texans, the Cardinals aren't so good, but then they have the 49ers and then the Rams. So they have a pretty decent schedule too. But I agree with you. If you need that production from the running back slot, it would be really difficult to turn that down if you were on the Davis side.
No doubt. Let's talk about another rookie running back, D'Onta Foreman. That injury looked serious, but up until that point, and it's been reported now that it may be an Achilles injury. There's still going to be, we'll hear more about that as the week progresses. 10 carries, 65 yards, 2 touchdowns, also caught 3 passes for 15 yards. Meanwhile, Lamar Miller did not look real good, especially in the running game, 22 carries for 61 yards. As I watched this games in bits and pieces while I also flipped back and forth to that Packer debacle, I thought to myself, we might be seeing the transfer a little bit to D'Onta Foreman. The injury obviously changes things. I wasn't a huge fan of Foreman coming out. He's impressed me on and off. If not for this injury, Matt, what would you be thinking about Foreman, and how does the injury itself affect how you feel about him?
He was like kind of like a juiced up LeGarrette Blount kind of, right? Like
that's a good one. I like that.
He has more speed, a little bit more power, I think, than him, but he doesn't catch the ball very well. So I think he was going to be a fun player to watch. It's really unfortunate about the Achilles. That's a difficult injury to come back from, especially in like this late in the season. So it's almost, I feel like almost we're not going to be able to really see what Foreman's going to do if he does anything after energy until like 2019 at this point.
Right. And dynasty owners that have been waiting for this moment had to have just dropped their head. And as soon as I saw the injury, I thought to myself, oh, just to get that glimpse of what he could be and then have it all taken away. I know dynasty owners have nothing. It's nothing to a dynasty owners like it is to the player or the team or his family or anything. But immediately I just thought to myself, man, what a crushing blow for anybody involved with Foreman. Another running back that is a rookie that impressed in week 11 is Samaje Perine in Washington, 23 carries, 117 yards, and a score. He also caught a pass. His first career 100-yard game obviously benefited from the Rob Kelly injury. I know your feelings about Perine coming into the season, and even during the preseason, we talked about him quite a bit, Matt. Have you been impressed with him? Were you impressed today? And what do you see as a long-term upside with Perine going forward?
I think he's going to be one of these guys that if he doesn't get a touchdown, we're going to be disappointed most weeks, you know? Yeah. Maybe he gets a little bit more now with the unfortunate Chris Thompson injury. That was a really sad one too. Talking about running back injuries, so I guess it's definitely possible he becomes kind of like a bell cow situation there now that Kelly is also out. I mean, he's basically the only game in town now, right? So I think he has to be doing something for us long term. I don't know. Like it seems like they could probably want to draft another back next season. I don't know. How about you? I really don't really have a whole lot of feelings about Perine. He's just kind of like there.
Yeah, you know? he's just there for me too.
He just plugs a hole, and that's like you're not excited about him.
Reminds me a little bit of how I feel about Jamal Williams in Green Bay. They seem like the same type of of runners to me.
They're
They're
hard to
both
me.
kind of plotters. They can get what's blocked. They're not going to contribute big time as pass catchers. And today or in week 11, I guess, Williams wasn't able to capitalize on it because of tough play with the offensive line and things. And meanwhile, Pirine was. And he comes up with the big game. I'm not rushing out to go add Samaje Pirine for sure, but he might contribute to some wins down the stretch in this fantasy season for sure. Another running back that had a big game in week 11 was Latavius Murray in Minnesota, 15 carries, 95 yards, and 2 scores. Second straight big game for Latavius, his third in 4 weeks. Jerick McKinnon also got 14 carries in that game for the Vikings for 48 yards and caught 5 passes, but he took a back seat once again in week 11. Which running back do you want in Minnesota as we go down the stretch, Matt? And do either of these guys have that big-time upside?
I still think I want McKinnon because of the PPR floor. You know, it's very nice that Murray got us 2 touchdowns today, but on a week where he doesn't get those touchdowns, it's going to be a little bit disappointing. Like, I think if you're starting Latavius Murray, you're probably like okay with 9.5 points, 10 points or whatever. But I think McKinnon can put up that kind of like 9-10 point floor every week and has the upside to do more. So I still want McKinnon despite Murray's involvement the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, especially in PPR. I think maybe it swings the other way if you're in a true standard league, which still exists, Matt. Maybe
it's kind of like obviously a much less explosive version of New Orleans, right? But maybe it's just a situation where both backs are going to have a little bit of value each week, you know?
Yeah, in that league where I passed on adding Mark Ingram, I decided to add Jerick McKinnon in that league. And that was 2 weeks ago. And since he's had a couple of down games sliding into that RB2 spot, and I paid a lot lower price, of course, but I haven't been real happy with my choice for sure. We'll see what happens down the stretch. I too like McKinnon better in these next 5 or 6 weeks, but we'll see what happens. Let's move to pass catchers. I want to talk about Keenan Allen, Matt, and I know you do too, because you've talked about him a lot on this show. He goes over 100 yards and scores. He double-digit catches. He has the 2 touchdowns. Huge game after struggling for weeks. A big part of the Chargers' big win out there in Los Angeles this week. That's the Keenan Allen that you expected to see all year, right, Matt?
Yeah, this is what we wanted from him, of course. We can't get a 40-point week every single week, but we definitely expected more kind of floor 15 to 20 point weeks. And I mean, wide receiver scoring again this season has been down. So, which just seems weird. We have had so much terrible quarterback play this year. So I'm sure that's contributing to it. Rivers has been up and down, and they have all those other weapons in the offense as well, and they still really want it to be a run-based offense, getting Melvin Gordon all those touches. So it was really nice to see this blow-up week from Keenan Allen, and I don't know if it's going to happen again this season, but I do think we're going to get back to kind of those more kind of floor games we're used from Keenan instead of those kind of disappointing games that we suffered through a week or two ago.
Yeah, and he's been disappointing, but not to the point of some of the other big disappointments.
Yeah.
Even his disappointing games have been 4 catches for 40 yards or 6 catches for 51 yards, something like that. So at least he can get you in PPR up to double digits, and you're not sitting there with an Amari Cooper goose egg.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know if he's quite been the disappointment that some dynasty owners have painted the picture that he's been. I really liked how they used him today. It seemed like they were using him as that quick in and out of breaks slant receiver, and maybe that'll open up that offense a little bit more going forward. So I think there's a light at the end of this tunnel, and we're going to see better production down the stretch. He could be one of those guys he is one of those guys that could get hot and carry owners down the stretch, and we could be talking about him next year once again as one of those big-time top-end, top-flight wide receivers, the guy that can make the leap for you once again. Another guy that can be that guy is Brandon Cooks, and he's been much more consistent than Allen. He goes over 100 yards once again, has the big score for the Patriots. He's been a bit inconsistent this year, but like you mentioned, Matt, all wide receivers have been, and scoring is down. He's currently a fringe wide receiver 1. His contract is up, but has an option for next year. Everybody expects that to get picked up by the Patriots, so he'll be back in New England again. Cooks is one of those receivers that everybody talks about because you fall on one side of the fence or the other, it seems. So many people think, oh, he's that small guy, you can't really trust him. Oh, but he's with Tom Brady, and he's got that explosive upside because of the speed and the offense that he plays in. Are you paying wide receiver 1 prices for Cooks this offseason if this continues? And especially in PPR leagues, what do you think of his upside going forward?
No, I'm not. I guess I'm on the other side, the non-believer side. I think he's a fine player. I just think he's always kind of overvalued. People have him as like a top, like as a wide receiver 1, a low end wide receiver 1. And to me, he's more of like a mid wide receiver 2. He only has 131 yard. He has 100 yard one. Excuse me. Let me try that again. He has one 100-yard game on the season back in week 3. He had 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. But other than that, he's had a nice floor. He's had 6 for 74 last week, 5 for 26 the day before that, 4 for 65. Like it's not like he's having these huge blow up games for you. So I don't really think we can count on him as a true fantasy wide receiver 1. And I don't really think that the Patriots are using him that way. I think when Chris Hogan was healthy, he was kind of the wide receiver 1 for them. And that production was reflected early in the season. So I just think Brandon Cooks for me is always going to be a guy that someone else is going to be more willing to pay for than I am.
I've slowly started to come around on Cooks. I was that guy that didn't draft him anywhere coming out of college, and then kind of was I shared a brain with you, your current feelings on him in his first couple of years in New Orleans, and slowly this year, now that I have him in a league or two, I see this production, I see that high floor. And especially in a year where big games from wide receivers are harder to come by, it seems like this Cooks explosion to go along with that high floor has made me feel like he belongs in that low-end wide receiver 1 conversation, certainly in the top 15 or 16. And I don't mind paying those prices if I need a player at the position. I like that he's going to be attached to Tom Brady for at least another year and a half. I like that he is really getting acquainted into this offense, and that these explosions are possible. Those are the kind of guys I want on my team. So I don't mind paying those prices. I don't know if that price is going to inflate in the offseason, especially if he continues what he did in week 11 down the stretch here. But he's certainly a guy that I want on my dynasty teams. Another guy that I wasn't real high on coming out of college was Corey Coleman. He has a big game in his return from injury against a good defense, 6 catches, 80 yards. He didn't score, but that stat line looks pretty good against that Jacksonville secondary. He's looked very good in spurts throughout his career, but the injuries have been a concern for Corey Coleman, Matt. What do you think of Coleman's ultimate upside, especially if he ever gets attached to a quality quarterback?
He was my favorite wide receiver that year, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field. It's just kind of the same old story with him. Not being able to stay on the field and not really having any quarterback to throw him the ball, So he's a tough one. Like, he's another guy that I like, but I just think that other people like him more than I do and are willing to draft him before I am. So I don't think I will ever own a significant amount of Corey Coleman, honestly.
Yeah, I think dynasty owners that were like, well, let's just see what happens before I put him in my lineup. If you need a wide receiver 3 now going forward, you can probably put him in your lineup in the short term. I think he's going to be up and down, and I agree with you. Other owners are going to like him more than me, so I'm not going to end up with him anywhere. He does have the same kind of upside to me as Cooks, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk to him back to back. It seems to me that if he ever ended up with a Tom Brady or a Drew Brees, like he could make that jump to the next level, and I think that's what dynasty owners are counting on.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to wait a little while, right? It just feels like this team is going to have to reset once again. Like, as much as I like Hugh Jackson, it just doesn't seem like it's going to work out there for him. So if he leaves and they're just starting from ground zero again, we've been through this over and over with the Browns, and of course Josh Gordon's coming back in week 13, so he's going to be the actual wide receiver 1, right?
Yeah, well, we'll see about that. We've talked about that. And we can rehash all the mistakes that the Cleveland has made, but I like to wonder what would Corey Coleman be like if he had Carson Wentz throwing him the football? And I'm sure it makes Browns fans cringe.
Or Deshaun Watson.
I mean, or Deshaun Watson, another one. Obviously, at some point, and this is for another podcast, of course, the Browns are going to have to make an attempt to get a franchise quarterback in there, and a real attempt, not continue to trade down and pick a guy late in the first or early in the second and pretend like they're trying. I kind of feel like if he ever gets that guy that's going to hold on to the job or can make players better around him, Coleman could make that jump. Yeah. So I'm slowly getting intrigued.
Yeah, go get Cousins for him. Go get Tyrod for him. I mean, get him somebody that can throw the ball.
Spend the number 1 pick in the draft on a real quarterback. Holy cow. Anyway, we digress. Let's talk about Kenny Stills, another speed receiver, 7 catches, 180 yards, and a touchdown on 8 targets for Miami in Week 11. He had that long touchdown. The other receivers there have been up and down. Landry, 6 catches, 91 yards and a score. Parker had a down game, 4 catches, 26 yards, and was held out of the end zone. Stills, another really inconsistent player, but he flashes. He continues to flash and look good in spurts, look good on specific plays. He's not even a full-time player right now, and it seems like every week I see Kenny Stills do something that makes me think, wow, he might be a good receiver that just isn't getting enough opportunities. He has 5 touchdowns on the years. There were whispers, Matt, of Landry wearing out his welcome in Miami earlier in the year. Are you a believer in Stills, and can he be a dynasty asset, a weekly dynasty asset, if he's ever a top 2 receiver and gets full-time playing time in Miami?
I mean, it's possible, I guess, if Landry leaves, but then that means they have 2 receivers that do most of the same things, you know. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but isn't the last time he was really productive this season was when Matt Moore came in the game after Cutler got hurt? So I think that there's a little bit of a tie there between those 2 guys. After Cutler went out again this week, still started performing.
Yeah, and I think they talked about it on the broadcast this week that they have a little bit of a rapport, and they've worked together on the scout team, or they've worked together quite a bit over the last couple of years. So maybe there's something to that for sure. I just wonder, because I see that quickness and I see him making those catches both in short and intermediate, and then also as a deep threat, if he could be more, if he got an opportunity. I really think he's a nice guy to have on the roster as a 5th or 6th wide receiver. If you have that luxury right now, you probably feel pretty good about Kenny Stills. I don't know necessarily if we're going to go run out and pay wide receiver 3 or even wide receiver 4 prices for him, but he just feels like a nice guy to have on the roster. The last guy I really want to talk to in the Dynasty Ups this week, or talk about in the Dynasty Ups this week, is a tight end that used to be a wide receiver in college, a name that probably some of our listeners might think, who was that guy when they heard his name on Sunday? It's Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end for the Arizona Cardinals. His first 3 catches of his career, 54 yards and 2 touchdowns on 5 targets. He played some passing downs over Jermaine Gresham and Troy Nicholas. Seals-Jones has a little bit of pedigree, as I mentioned. He was a wide receiver at Texas A&M. I remember him because he was a Devy player of interest. I play in many Devy leagues, and he was a guy that was getting picked up in a lot of those leagues as a high upside guy, and not even really deep Devy leagues. He seems to have kind of fallen off the radar, went undrafted. Now all of a sudden he emerges, catches those 3 touchdowns. Perhaps this is the same thing as we were talking about with Stills in Miami, but the 3rd-string quarterback Gabbert comes in. He has a little rapport with him potentially, and he catches 2 touchdowns suddenly. Is Ricky Seals-Jones a guy that's on your radar, and is he a guy worth adding at the end of a bench in a standard-sized league?
He is someone I've always been really intrigued with the physical talent that he has, and in larger roster spot leagues, like say like 30 or so, roster spot leagues, he's been on and off my roster a few times this year. As kind of like that last guy if I need to pick up somebody for a bye week or whatever. He's just been really hard to hold on to because that Bruce Arians offense does not really use the tight end, although Jermaine Gresham has had a couple of nice games this season. I think that's more due to the quarterback situation there and the targets that they feel comfortable with, maybe, because Carson Palmer certainly wasn't utilizing those guys like that. So I think he is a fun little prospect, but I wouldn't really expect him to, end up being like a back end tight end one or anything long term.
No, I wouldn't expect those things. But if I had an empty roster spot in a 25-man league, or somebody went on IR this week and I was able to free up a spot, I'd put the bid in and throw him on my roster and just see what happens. You mentioned Arians. He isn't a lock to be back in Arizona. Palmer's not a lock to be under center in Arizona again next year. There could be some change in the desert next season. And maybe Seals Jones wiggles his way into a role in an offense which utilizes the tight end a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about Ricky Seals Jones next offseason as a guy worth having on a roster. So savvy dynasty owners should probably be adding him now. Maybe actually savvy dynasty owners maybe had him on their roster and on a taxi squad already. But if he's a free agent out there, he's at least worth a look in leagues where there's usually nothing on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I guess my counterpoint would be that, Fitzgerald, he signed this 1-year extension. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play next season, but it probably means he's going to play next season. And if they're going to change up the Arians and Carson's going to walk away, like, why would he really want to come back if they're going to change up like everything? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess the counterpoint to that is, why would Larry Fitzgerald leave Arizona this late into his career? He's a legend out there and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just feel like if he's going to come back, it's probably because he wants to actually try to win, and start over. Then, like, why is he going to sign a contract to come back? But
sure, yep, valid points, no doubt. Now that we've covered the ups, though, let's move to some of these downers, and there were quite a few of them. Really, Week 11 was kind of a bummer for me. There were a lot of performances that just, I know there were a lot of real good ones, but it seemed like there were a lot of downs as well, and we're going to cover a few of them here. The first one, as we start with the quarterbacks, Alex Smith, 27 of 40, 230 yards, did not throw a touchdown pass. In fact, Kansas City didn't score one, and 2 interceptions. He had that huge start to the season. There was talk of him being the NFL's first half MVP, and he struggled for 3 straight weeks since, averaging just 231 yards while throwing 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions over those last 3 games. He doesn't appear to be pushing the ball down the field like in the first half of the season. We're getting back to that check back Charlie in Alex Smith a little bit, it seems like. Are you concerned about the rest of 2017? Because a few weeks ago, Matt, we were encouraging dynasty owners in 2 quarterback leagues and superflex leagues to add Smith for quarterback depth, to make a run at a championship. I'm not so confident in Smith going forward after seeing this happen for multiple weeks in a row.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning, and I don't know about how you watch football on Sundays, Dan. I typically watch I typically watch Red Zone on Sundays, and then I go back during the week and watch the games on Game Pass later. So this is a game I definitely want to go back and watch, because what has changed about this offense? Why were they so explosive early and they're not now? So that's something I really want to dig into this week. And the Giants, I mean, they got tore up by San Francisco last week. So, maybe why
do we play this game?
Yeah, like it just like
you can't figure anything out.
It makes no sense. So I really want to go back and see what happened to Alex Smith in this. My guess is he had a lot of pressure from the Giants' defensive line, but I don't really know. I don't have a good answer for this one. I still kind of like him for the rest of 2017, just based on his schedule. But I mean, the Giants were one of those games that I liked in this schedule. So if he's not going to perform against this team again that got beat up by San Francisco last week, then maybe we need to reevaluate what he's got going forward.
Yeah, I'm certainly leery. And as I watch bits and pieces of the game, I watch football a lot like you do, Matt. And I was locked in mostly to the Packers game in the early slate on Sunday. I did see quite a bit of it because, quite frankly, the Packers game was disgusting. And that was the close game worth watching. And as I watched, and as I've watched over the last few weeks, I see teams bottling up Kareem Hunt in that running game, and Alex Smith, while getting that pressure, isn't as quick to fire that deep pass again. It's a lot of that same stuff we've seen in the past with him. there's got to be a reason that those guys aren't getting open, or that the creativity that we saw early in the year isn't working anymore. I'm reluctant too to really say he's going to immediately jump back up to that quarterback one role. Obviously, if you have him in a 2-quarterback league, you're probably using him, and you're just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best down the stretch.
There was also a lot of wind in that game today, so maybe that was part of it. So
I think it was a factor. The passing game on both sides wasn't big, but the other quarterback on the other side is Eli Manning as well.
Yeah, so maybe we need another week to evaluate. Hopefully, they come back around next week and maybe not jump to like huge conclusions here. But it definitely is concerning that it's multiple weeks in a row.
Another quarterback that I don't even know if struggled is the right word for Brett Hundley, but it wasn't good. Hundley was 21 of 36, 239 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 awful interceptions in the Packers' big loss to the Ravens at home in Week 11. I write the player updates on DLF for the Packers, and I wrote that before we got on the air on this Sunday evening, and I called his performance embarrassing, Matt. I also wrote that dynasty owners in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues with Hundley rostered should look elsewhere for developmental talent at the position once Aaron Rodgers returns. I can't imagine you feel any other way, right?
Yeah, it was very disappointing, especially after that early drive where he had a couple of nice passes downfield and then he threw an interception in the end zone. That was so deflating because as ugly as a game as it was, they were only down like 6-0 midway through the second quarter, and they were still in the game, and they still couldn't, capitalize and at least make a game of it. I had really high hopes early on that he looks okay. And, maybe they can hang in and win this game, and then Rodgers will really have a chance to come back and at least get us to the playoffs. But it's just not going to happen for this team.
Yeah, that ship sailed.
It's gone. Yeah,
it's gone. It's over. Hundley was disgusting. Yeah, and I know a few weeks ago, Mike McCarthy, who we could talk about too, he had those comments about Hundley, how he's not the problem. He's the problem. He was the primary problem on Sunday against the Ravens. The Ravens made him look bad, and he made himself look bad. That flutter, the second interception that he just threw up there was very ill-advised. He took horrible sacks, held the ball too long, was reluctant to make throws to open receivers, which this isn't the first week we've seen that either. He is not a developmental quarterback in the NFL or for dynasty owners. Feel free to move on if you have him on your roster. Another developmental quarterback for dynasty owners coming into the year this season was Nathan Peterman, the rookie in Buffalo. And speaking of disgusting, Peterman, although they weren't all his fault, and I did watch quite a bit of that game, Peterman threw 5 picks. And for, I believe, only under 75 yards in the game. He was replaced by Tyrod Taylor, which he probably shouldn't have taken over the reins for him in the first place. In fact, this probably proves that he shouldn't have. It was ugly for Peterman. The Bills aren't going anywhere, and I understand trying to shake things up. Putting all the blame on the veteran quarterback wasn't the right move in this case, and Peterman was thrown to the wolves, it seemed like to me, Matt. What are your thoughts on Peterman and the Bills quarterback situation?
I just don't get it. I know they lost, I think it was 2 in a row, but you're 5-4. The AFC is just a mess. You're still mathematically involved in the playoff hunt. And like, how nice would it be for Buffalo fans to have a playoff team? They haven't had one since 1999. So to make the switch now, when they made that benching last week, Tyrod was one of 4 quarterbacks that had thrown for at least 10 touchdowns and less than 3 interceptions. And the other ones were Brady, Rodgers, and Alex Smith. So it's not his fault. I just don't know why the Bills want to make it his fault for everything. It's disappointing, and it's telling that Tyrod came in, and it was garbage time, but came in and threw for 150 yards and a touchdown in like a quarter of play. It was just a bad spot for them to even try it out with Peterman on the road against a Chargers team that have just been rushing the passer like crazy, just dominating on that side of the ball. Like that's what you want to throw your 5th round rookie into. Like wait a minute, wait till you're completely out of playoff contention. So I don't know if we can really glean anything from Peterman's performance today. I think it was just too tough of a spot to really to do it, but he certainly wasn't prepared for what was thrown at him today. So I don't know what they're going to do next week. I mean, are they going to go back to Peterman at this point? It's really concerning. Like, I think they could just break him and he would be done, you know?
Right. And he might be broken after that. That's rough for a rookie to see that. He obviously wasn't ready, and dynasty owners should probably just move him back down on the roster and not think about him for a while, even if he does play, because I don't see that getting any better. I think the obvious choice is to let Tyrod play, and hopefully for owners of the other skill position players on the team, Tyrod is back under center. I know Shady had the big game this week, and he seems pretty much like the kind of guy that can score whether he has a good quarterback or a poor one under center. It certainly seems to me like the Bills have a lot of question marks that they need to answer, and the sooner they answer them for dynasty owners, probably the better.
I want to see Tyrod go to Jacksonville next season. That's what I want.
That's an interesting fit. For sure. I don't mind it at all, especially with Allen Robinson being back.
Yeah, reunite with Marone and just he'll let him run the run-based offense with Fournette, and I think it'd be beautiful.
Yeah, and Tyrod has shown that he's fine throwing the ball 15 times a game and then running it 5 times a game as well. Interesting point for sure. Let's move to a couple of wide receivers here that did not look good as well. Let's start with Amari Cooper, and I know the Cooper apologists will jump on me and probably say, "Whoa, wait, he caught a touchdown. That was a junk touchdown." Although the route was impressive, a slant that he cut off early and ran to the outside and certainly beat the defender and got the score. It was an ugly stat line overall again for Cooper. He's had the one huge game and nothing else. I've been a Cooper fan since he was at Alabama, but I'm starting to fall off this bandwagon and starting to think that dynasty owners, and specifically dynasty writers and analysts that do rankings, need to start thinking about moving Cooper down their wide receiver ranks. What are your thoughts?
It's so hard with him. I mean, we're saying we're disappointed in a player who started his career with 2,000-yard seasons. I mean, I don't know what more we want from the guy. I mean, I know what we want from the guy. We want him to catch 100 yards and a touchdown every single week. But he put up a giant game earlier a few weeks ago, a couple 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to do with him. I still think he's a top 10 talent. I wonder if Derek Carr's back injury that he suffered earlier in the year is really still bothering him, and that's what's wrong with this offense. The defensive secondary is a mess. This team is just really one of the biggest disappointments of the season. I can't really think of another one, honestly. Dan, can you? I mean, the whole team is letting us down, both for fantasy and for a real NFL fan. So I hope that it gets better for these guys. I think if we get a healthy Carr, if the defense gets better, if Amari stops dropping balls, if Michael Crabtree moves on, I think there's the possibility there that Amari is still an elite dynasty asset, but we're just not seeing it right now on a consistent basis.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of us are clinging to hopes and dreams when it comes to Amari Cooper, and your point is well taken about the start to his career. It's been good. 1,000-yard seasons aren't easy to come back by, for sure. He's had the 100-yard games. He the touchdown numbers aren't probably where we expect, but he's caught 5 and 6 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. And probably will approach that. He's at 4 so far in 2017 as well. But even if he reaches just 1,000 yards, which, to be quite frank, is maybe a stretch at this point, the expectation is a lot higher. And when you're ranking a player in the top 8 at the position, and some have him in the top 3 or 4, it seems I'm hesitant to be able to make that leap. And I know the talent's there, and I'm excited about him here as well, or have been in the past. But it's hard for me to see him as a top 5 asset at the position when he just simply is not putting up the numbers. And those first 2 seasons were not elite yet. They were wide receiver 2 type seasons. So maybe we just need to move him to the lower half or for sure the lower half of the wide receiver 1s and possibly into the top half of the wide receiver 2s. I looked at DLF's rankings at the position, and we have a lot of great rankers. Our buddy Eric Harder, who does rankings for wide receivers, has him all the way down at 23. Nobody else has him outside of the top 10. I expect him to start trickling down outside that top 10 if this continues over the next few weeks. Another receiver that is up there in the rankings, but has certainly been up and down, is Stephon Diggs of the Vikings. 4 catches on Sunday for 32 yards. Adam Thielen still got his. He had 6 catches, 123 yards, and the long touchdown. It seems like it's going to be one or the other for the Vikings between Diggs and Thielen. I'm not sure if I'm jumping off any bandwagons when it comes to Diggs, because I love his talent as well. Seems like the injuries are a problem here. He gets nicked up early in the season when he's healthy. He's elite even. Later, he gets dinged up, and the numbers start to go up and down. What are your thoughts on Diggs going forward for 2017 and beyond, Matt?
Yeah, he's definitely a guy that you don't want to play when he's on the injury report. He doesn't seem like to be able to play through injuries very well. So I don't know if that was the case today. Thielen seems to have this nice rapport with Case Keenum there, and it doesn't really seem like the Vikings want to move on from him and move to Teddy Bridgewater at this point, because he's just playing so well and they're winning games. So I think for Diggs' value to like really be consistent, I think we're gonna need to go back to Bridgewater before we really see that. But I mean, I don't know how you bench either of these guys any week. You know, that offense is just playing so well right now, and I think at any one of these weeks, Diggs could be on the receiving end of one of those 150-yard, 2-touchdown kind of games. So I think he's just a guy you keep putting in your lineups, and he has an okay floor. You know, it wasn't great today, 7.2 points, but I mean, he's not goose egging for you like we talked about with some other players. So I just think you got to keep starting both of these guys. I mean, I don't know where is he at in your rankings, Dan? Is he a wide receiver 1 for you?
Yeah, he's right at the end of it. But you know, we talked about Brandon Cooks. He's actually at 12. We talked about Brandon Cooks as one of our ups, and these guys seem like relatively similar players, except Cooks is attached to Tom Brady and Diggs is attached to whoever's under center, currently Case Keenum in Minnesota. And they're usually side by side in rankings. In fact, in DLF's composite rankings, Cooks is 10, Diggs is 11. Who do you prefer of the two?
I do have Diggs ahead right now. But you know, you make a good point about the quarterback attachment for sure. I don't know. He's a year younger than Cooks. I kind of like the way he plays better than I do Cooks. So maybe it's just a personal preference there, but you're definitely right on about the quarterback situation. I have no argument for that.
And I've been a big Diggs fan for a long time. I was one of the guys that were tooting his horn coming through the draft process when he was coming out of Maryland. I still love his talent. And like the player, obviously I have him at 12 overall, but I easily want Cooks at this point. How about the other guy we just talked about, Amari Cooper? Do you want Cooks or Cooper?
I have them. I have Cooper at 8. I have Diggs at 9, and I have Cooks at 13. So those guys are solidly ahead for me right now. But you're making a strong case that I should maybe change some of that up for sure.
I just think it's worth talking about. Something worth thinking about for sure. I still have Cooper over Cooks as well, and then obviously over Diggs. But it's a question that I'm going to ponder going forward as well. I really feel myself pulling towards moving Cooks above that top 10 mark even, and into the single digits. And it seems counterintuitive to what I've done in the past or what I've thought in the past. But man, having Tom Brady throwing him the ball really feels good for me. So Cooks is an interesting study case for me as the offseason especially approaches. Yes. After this postseason moves along. How about Kelvin Benjamin? You know, I've never been another guy I've never been a real high on, but Benjamin moves on to Buffalo, which I wasn't a big fan of. I wasn't a huge fan of him anyway with the speed concerns, and I know he's huge, but not a great route runner either. That injury didn't look good today, which is another negative. Ending up in Buffalo, as I said, that's another negative. I just don't like Kelvin Benjamin. Talk me off that ledge when it comes to KB.
Well, it just depends on who's well. First of all, it depends on the injury situation,
right? And we don't know much about that just yet.
Yeah, we don't know enough about it to make a decision there. I was actually cautiously optimistic about him going there when I thought Tyrod was going to be the quarterback, because he seems like it's a good receiver for that style of quarterback who wants to throw it up to one of the big guys in the end zone. You know, he's been doing it very well with Charles Clay all season, and to be able to add that red zone threat in Benjamin, I was actually kind of excited about it. But he definitely does not fit well with Nate Peterman, which makes the benching of Tyrod all the more confusing to me. You know, Benjamin is not a guy who's going to fit in that West Coast offense that Pat Shurmur kind of wants to run there. You know, so. It doesn't make any sense if they're going to keep starting Peterman, why they would make that move for Benjamin. So if Tyrod's there and he's healthy, like I'm okay with it. But it's like, you know, like my last starter, you know, my last flex player, maybe a wide receiver 3 in a bye week. But yeah, I'm not super excited about him either.
Yeah, me neither. My feelings on him are as low as they've ever been. I'm leery about him even beyond this year now. Now that the Bills obviously aren't going anywhere in 2017, the injury happens, and he's under contract there now. And who's going to be throwing him the ball? What kind of offense is that going to be? Will that coaching staff be able to pull in a few more players that fit what they're going to try to do? I don't know. So I'm leery at best.
It's funny that both him and Jordan Matthews are there too now. Like, you know, 2 first-round receivers in that first-round rookie pick receivers from that draft class, and now they're both on the same team, both not really doing anything.
Right, and it paints a pretty bleak picture for me with my love for Zay Jones as well.
Yeah,
the whole situation there. I don't feel good about it. And I really, as a McCoy guy, I really wish he could find his way somewhere else just so I could root for him and not be down in the dumps every time I turn on Buffalo. Anyway, let's move to the one tight end I want to talk to you about, Matt. He's our guy. And he's not just your guy anymore because you've crossed me over. I'm a big Evan Ingram guy as well. I have him in a few leagues and wish I had him in all of them. But this week I had him in each one of those lineups, and he laid a stinker. 1 catch for 9 yards. He had multiple drops in the game, at least 2 that I saw. I saw something on Twitter that said he dropped 3 and maybe even 4 balls. That doesn't look real good. That all said, I'm not worried about Evan Ingram. You know, Sterling Shepard wasn't in there once again, and there have been people that said his production has been associated with Shepard, which can't all be true, but that's a topic for something else. It's just a down game for a rookie tight end, right? He's going to bounce back and he'll be just fine. You still see him as an elite asset at the tight end position, right, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He's my tight end 3. I have no questions with him. I just think that was probably a tough spot for him to be like literally the only thing going in the offense. I mean, Roger Lewis had that nice play. Tavares King has been productive the last couple of weeks, but
yeah, those guys aren't scaring a Chiefs defense when they're game planning. However,
right, exactly. They plan to take down Evan Ingram. Like they knew that was how the Giants wanted to attack them. So I'm not worried about it at all. I think it was just a rough game. That 1 catch too that he laid out for, and he caught it with one hand and tried to bring it to his. I believe to his right hand, and then it just kind of barely grazed the ground. He wasn't able to pull that one on, but he definitely made the effort to go get that ball. And if he had, then I mean, the Giants still won the game, but that would have put them in a position to win even more comfortably.
Right, and he drew a pass interference penalty. It was obvious that the Chiefs were keying in on him and trying to slow him down, particularly in the red zone. I saw double coverage on multiple passing plays. They were concerned about Evan Ingram, and that's all. Can you imagine if Odell Beckham Jr. was pulling that coverage away? It really feels to me like Jimmy Graham back when he was in New Orleans and early in his career, and they had the other pass catchers around him, and you just couldn't put 2 guys on him, and they're moving him around. It seems like that should be used. I'm not confident that the current New York coaching staff can put him in those positions consistently, but we're not going to have to worry about that next year. Ingram has a chance to be the number 1 scoring tight end in fantasy football next season. So having expectations like that, you should be pretty happy with his upside.
Yeah, absolutely. Just if you can get him for like almost, I mean, what would you move for Ingram at this point? I think I would move like any pick except for maybe the 101 and 102 for Ingram right now. If I knew I had the 103 and I needed a tight end, I would move it for Evan Ingram. That's how much I love him. I've
made some offers that are pretty close to that. I have one league where I'm fringe playoff team and really am confident that I'm not going to do any damage due to some injuries. And I offered my first, and that could be as high as 103. I offered my first plus some players. I haven't been able to get him in those leagues. So other owners are valuing him the same way. I feel like this offseason might be a little bit of a buying window with high to mid first round picks. And I'll be sending out those offers. You know, dynasty owners become in love with draft picks, especially when they're on the clock. And it seems like I'll be the guy that every time I'm on the clock, I'll be the guy that's saying, okay, do I want this pick, who I'm going to get here, or Evan Ingram? Do I want this pick plus this guy or Evan Ingram? And I'll be sending out those offers. So something to think about as we move into the off season. For sure. Matt, the last thing I wanted to talk about, I caught myself setting lineups today and looking at standings. We're getting close to the playoff push. We're in the playoff push, but we're getting close to the playoffs. And I see myself positioning myself for the playoffs. I looked at a lot of standings in my leagues. I looked at my top players, their schedules going forward. Is there anything that you're doing as a dynasty owner as we approach the playoffs, especially with those teams that are going to make the playoffs for sure, or those contenders? What are you doing to get ready for our postseason run?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely making moves right now. I think it's kind of popular now to kind of hate on trade deadlines, but I really like trade deadlines. I think that the old moniker deadline spur action is correct, because I've seen so many trades in the last couple of weeks. Even this morning, like I had a flurry of like trade emails coming through. So not just me. So owners are moving and shaking because they know in 2 weeks that's going to be their final roster, either heading to the playoffs or heading to a kind of a rebuilding or reloading offseason, So I've definitely been making the moves like that too. So depending on which way you're going, now is the time to go get the players, because you know what your team is like now. We have 2 weeks left for the fantasy playoffs in most leagues, so what your team is, where
what you're missing,
go, what you're missing, or that you need to offload some assets and get ready for the rookie drafts and Devy drafts. So now is the time to act, guys. Like, don't wait till the very last minute, because something is going to come up in life, or somebody on the other end of a trade offer for a partner for a piece that you want. Maybe something comes up in his life and he's not able to get it done before that. So right now, 2 weeks before the end of the season, before the playoff start, is the time to act and make sure you have enough time to get those moves done.
Yeah, especially for those of you that have the deadline, for sure. I'm in favor of the deadline as well. I play in one league that doesn't have it, and it bugs me every single year. Look at those matchups. Get yourself ready to set your lineup every single week before you make those trades, and send out those offers. Don't be afraid to send out your first-round pick in an offer right now if you're a true contender, because you'll be loving that trade if the guy puts you over the top and you win a championship. For sure. Thank you to all of our listeners for listening to this week's edition of the DLF Dynasty Podcast. You can catch us on Twitter. We are at DLF Podcast. You can also catch all of the hosts of the pod on Twitter. Chad, who wasn't with us today, the nurse, is under the weather, but I'm sure it had to do with the Seahawks not playing today. So you can find him at Chad_Scott13. You can follow Matt at MPricer, and follow me at DMyler22. Thanks for listening to the 281st edition of the DLF Dynasty Podcast. For my buddy Matt Price, I am Dan Myler. We will catch you next week.
Nice work.
All right. I'm glad we were able to start a little early.
Absolutely.
That's
I mean, those afternoon games were just terrible. Like,
it was brutal to watch.
I didn't even want to. Like, I when I left was, I think Cincinnati took a lead again. That was the only game where anything was happening. But even that was a boring. We had so many bad quarterback matchups today, man.
Yeah, it was ugly.
Savage versus Gabbard. Sure. I mean, when did we ever think that Goff versus Keenum was going to be like the marquee matchup of the week?
Elite matchup of the day.
Ridiculous.
Right, let's open up the file. I needed something big to happen for Gronk in the afternoon games in one league. I really wanted to win.
Not great, right?
It was only like 3 for 40 or something. Oh, yeah. It wasn't all that great. He damn near caught a touchdown, which would have been awesome. But I'm going to lose in a place where I really needed a win. I really feel like the best team in the league, and I'm a fringe playoff team. It just stinks. But but that such is life.
I have a couple leagues like that where I'm like, there's one that's only 4 teams make the playoffs, and I'm like, there's no total point spot. It's all based on record. So I'm like 4th in the league and in scoring, but like 7th in record. It's so annoying. I keep playing like, it's that thing where you keep playing the highest scoring team every week.
Right.
Like last week, I scored like 165 as like the second highest, and he had like 170 or something. So annoying.
Ugh. I tell you what, I'm so on board with the whole put the last playoff spot as the highest scoring team that's not one of the top 5 in the standings.
I do too. I do too in my leagues.
I do too, but there's still leagues that don't do it, and it's sickening. It's so bad because the best team in the league a lot of times misses the playoffs.
Yep.
And certainly the best owner a lot of times. There's guys that hit so many injuries, but they work it so hard that they're still scoring points and run into trouble. It's sickening to me. And
Sanio told me he has a team that's 1st in scoring but 8th in terms of record and is not going to make the playoffs. Like it's so ridiculous.
That one's really bad. I have a couple that are like top 3 in scoring or 3rd or 4th, I also have one that's the other way around. I have 1 loss in a league where I'm 8th in scoring.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get the number 1 seed in that league. And I've done what I probably shouldn't have done. I traded for Ingram and Thielen in that league. I traded my 1st and my 2nd round pick next year for
both of those guys. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. But the guy who took my 1st for Ingram said, "I still think you might not make the playoffs." This was a week and a half ago, and right before he gets the 3 touchdown game and stuff. And now I'm slowly bumping my way up. I moved up to 7th last week, a lot because of Ingram. I expect to move up in the scoring again this week, and I'm certainly going to still be the number 1 seed because everybody else has at least 3 losses. So it's like, and I want to say something about it, like, look at this. This is how you got to do it, guys. Go for it. You got your chance. Just because I'm built for the future, And I almost the guy who took my 1st for Ingram wanted Mixon so bad. Nope, I'm not doing it without Mixon. I need Mixon straight up for him. And I kept balking, and I would have done it.
Mixon for both?
No, just one. Just Mixon for Ingram.
I got it.
Mix him straight up for Ingram, and I would have done it. I know I would have done it.
That's funny. We talked about that sort of trade last week, Chad and I.
Yeah, I know. I heard about it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I would totally do that too. But if you got them both for a 1st and 2nd, are you kidding me?
Yeah, it was too easy. Yeah, they were 2 separate deals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were 2 separate deals. But he wanted Mixon straight up for Ingram in one deal, and finally he took my 1st, and then Thielen, I offered the guy a 2nd round pick, and he took it. That was my starting offer.
So sick, dude.
And that might end up the last pick in the 2nd round for Thielen. And it's contract, so things matter. Thielen is only a 5-week rental. But still, that's stealing. That's too easy.
Oh, for sure. And you can probably make him an RFA or whatever, right? So
yeah, right. I'll be able to retain him if I want to pay him a high salary, which I might. You never know. Depends on what's out there in free agency.
He's like a top 3 receiver this season.
Right, it's crazy. And that's half PPR, so I think he's 4th. But he'll probably be top 3 after today. Holy cow. He's so consistent. He's got such a nice floor. So I've never been a big Chargers fan until today. I play in Survivor, that?
Yeah.
And I have one league that there were 5 of us left coming into today. And all 4 of the other people had Kansas City, and I had the Chargers.
Oh, nice.
And so Kansas City loses, and I tell my wife, "Oh my God, my wife was like glued to the TV watching the Chargers game in the 1st quarter during the end of the first games, which I was watching mainly because of the podcast and stuff. But she's watching, and they get the first interception and return it for a touchdown. She's hooting and hollering in the other room, like, "Oh my gosh, they just scored! They're up 7-0 already!" She's all excited. And I won $1,300 because the Chargers won.
Yeah, holy shit, dude! Nice.
And when they were up like 37-7, I was like, you don't even have to watch it anymore. It's over. There's no way they come back.
So what
like,
what are you buying her?
She wants furniture for our new basement. I finished our basement, so we'll probably do that.
Dude. We're closing on our first house.
I read that. I read the tweet. That's pretty exciting, dude.
So we're excited. Yeah, get out of rental life and get into a place of our own. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, very cool. Like in outside of the city, or where?
Like 10, 15 miles east of here in a little like area called Lemon Grove.
Are you in the middle of town right now?
We are in an area called North Park, which is kind of north of like the downtown area, but like really it's like 2 or 3 miles from the downtown area. And the places in this area are like $500,000 plus, like it's $500,000 like starting. Yeah. So we got lucky and found a place that for $270,000, which still is pretty expensive in most parts of the country for a little townhouse, but
for sure
out here it's a ridiculously good price. So we were pretty excited. We've been looking for like on and on for like 3 years. So
I imagine your wife has a career and you guys are pretty successful and stuff like that.
She's a teacher. I'm a zookeeper. We're never going to be rich, but make enough now to at least get a small little place. So. Yeah. And it's the best place.
Well, good
the best
for
part
you.
is it's like half a mile from her school, so like she's going to be able to bike to work and all this stuff. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it'll be good.
That's awesome, dude. It's the best investment in the world. I would never tell somebody not to buy a house. It's
scary. Like it's really scary. Sitting all that money and all like 500 pages of paperwork we've done and back and forth on like all this stuff, like the escrow company, but it'll be worth it for sure.
Yeah, dude. I have 3 houses.
You own 3 houses?
Yeah. Well, I don't own them. The bank does. 2 of them are rentals. Like I'm a landlord.
That's my job. That's one of my dreams is to be a slumlord.
Oh, really? I try not to be a slumlord. But we started buying houses because here you can buy something and have a $380 a month payment, a small little 2-bedroom house with no garage and stuff like that. Have a $380 payment and then rent it out for $700 a month. It's like no brainer.
We pay $1,500 a month in rent right now for like a shitty little like 750 square foot. Like they call it a 2-bedroom. It's more like a 1.5.
$1,500.
That's our rent right now. Our mortgage is going to be $1,900 a month. So,
oh my god,
ridiculous! It's ridiculous, dude. It's
how many square feet is your house?
It's like about 1,000.
A ranch style?
It's a townhouse style.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's out of control.
Is it? And it's like attached to other?
We share one wall.
Do you have? Will you have like maintenance? Will you have to do the maintenance?
Yes, I think not all of it. Like the exterior and like all of the like the groundskeeping and stuff is done by the HOA. But like like internal stuff, we're gonna do that. Like the first thing we're probably gonna do is upgrade the windows. I think because our windows are like the 1980 style single pane.
Yeah.
Crappy ones. But everything else is like upgraded.
Just the difference,
Yeah, we looked.
How many square feet did you say?
It's just about 1,000 square feet. So it's okay for the
I have a 2,400 square foot ranch. That's both floors combined. And my payment's like $700 a month.
Yeah, but you live in North Dakota or
South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yeah, that is mind-boggling to me. And $1,500 a month for a 700 square foot.
We almost moved to. We had an opportunity that didn't work out to move to Madison to one of my buddies, and there was a house literally right next door to him that we were going to buy for like $220 or something, and it was like a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,000 something square feet. Like it's just San Diego, Southern California, man. It's really hard out here. We looked at a condo in like the area where
Madison. What Madison?
Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But we looked at the area where we're renting right now. We looked at a brand new condo that was being built. Just when I walked into an open house, smaller than the place we're in now. So like, I don't know, 700 square feet, maybe $700,000.
Oh my God.
That was the price tag on the thing.
It's all because of the location. Because it's so close.
Close to the ocean, close to downtown, the weather, like all that stuff. So it's ridiculous. Hopefully it wasn't a bad investment. I mean, I don't think
it's a great investment. I promise you.
So we're excited. But so there's a chance I can be on 2 weeks from now, but the 9th, the day we're moving, I mean, that weekend, I doubt I might not even have internet yet, you know? So that weekend I would definitely plan for. If you want, depending on what Chad wants to do, I could take next week, and because if I'm going to be out the following 2 weeks, but totally up to you guys.
Okay. You should probably plan on next week then.
Okay. I'll take it. I'll send Chad a message, see if he wants it. And if not, then I'll just do it.
Okay. That sounds good.
Cool, man. Have a good night, dude.
Yep, you too. Thanks.